Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our May 2022 Guide Pathways Office Hours series, part of our larger spring series and part of our larger ongoing professional development series that we provide for the San Diego Imperial region. Today's time together, we will be talking about how you bring theory to praxis. Our topic is transforming culture through equity-minded redesign, and we'll be spotlighting San Diego College of Continuing Education. We're so excited to welcome the Vice President of Student Services at SDCCE, Dr. Shakerra Carter. And Dr. Carter, thank you so much. We're so glad that you've come to share with our group some of the strategic work that you've been able to accomplish at SDCCE this semester and plan on continuing moving forward. This session will outline the community-driven, inclusive, and engaging process that fueled a major equity-minded redesign effort at the college. While we'll be talking specifically about the San Diego College of Continuing Education, what we're really focused on is how this work is designed to be impactful and how it's really de-siloing redesign efforts by engaging in truly cross-functional teams across the college. We know that many of you are knee-deep in your own redesign processes and hope that you can be inspired by what's been done here and can transfer that learning into what you are doing moving forward. So as always, we hope that our office hours are a chance for educational practitioners to problem solve and grow together. Each office hour series, if this is your first opportunity connecting with us, is really designed to do a deep dive into a specific topic. And we have taken the chance to, of course, highlight a wonderful example today, and typically do either in the region or looking at examples across the state of California. These sessions are recorded and are sent out with additional resources following the event. So keep an eye on your emails in case you want to review anything that you've learned and or share with colleagues. In case we haven't had the opportunity to connect before, hello, my name is Stacy Teeters. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm joined by my colleague, Simone McDaniels, as the Guided Pathways Regional Coordinator team for the San Diego Imperial region. So it is so good to see many friendly faces on our call today.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Stacy, and thank you everyone for being here. We were so inspired by the work happening at SDCCE and truly cherish the opportunity to be a part of it, to partner with both of the vice presidents at San Diego College of Continuing Ed to support that community inclusive vision for equity-centered transformational change. We're really looking forward to hearing the insights and the details. So again, thank you, Dr. Carter, for joining us. Before we just dive into everything that you're going to share with us today, we want to make sure we take a moment to find out who we're sharing space with this afternoon, or if it's a different time zone, if we're just sharing space with you. So during our time today, we will take some moments for audience engagement and to answer questions using something called Mentimeter. It's a digital engagement tool to hear ideas, to hear what you're thinking, to check in with you, and these questions will be anonymous. So we're dropping a link in the chat right now. You can go ahead and click it to answer. Actually, I'm going to drop a different link. The question that's going to pop up on the screen is just asking you who you are, what type of work that you're doing, so we can kind of cater the presentation to who's in the room, what type of work that you do. So if you go ahead and refresh that link, it should direct you to a question just asking you who you are, what type of work you do. So one moment. Awesome. It looks like we've got a good mix. I see some student services, some instruction. I see some admin folks. Lovely. Okay. And then this next question, I think we can go ahead and answer. What's your position? What type of role are you in? Are you a faculty member? Are you a Guided Pathways lead? Are you a classified professional in student services or instruction? What type of work do you do? Got some counseling faculty, some administrators. Love a Guided Pathways lead joining us, a couple Guided Pathways leads. Lovely. We'll give you one more moment to answer. Awesome. So I'm going to drop the link in chat one more time. If you're joining us, we're using this link in the chat to answer a couple of questions. And since we're talking about transformational redesign and change, we wanted to ask you all, what are some of the sticking points that impact your ability to implement true transformational change on your campus? We'll play some music, give you a couple of minutes to think about it, and just consider, what are those sticking points? What are those pieces that you always seem to kind of bump up against when you're trying to implement true transformational change at your campus? These answers will be anonymous and results will be hidden while you're working so that we can all share freely. Let's go ahead. So I'm seeing us folks holding on to the past. It's hard to focus on adaptive change when everything is an emergency. Resistance to change, I see a couple of times. Priorities, not being able to have open or real conversations about equity. Sounds like there's some real trouble with like moving forward to action once we do identify something that might work. Culture, lack of adequate staffing, sometimes too many chefs in the kitchen, deficit mindset thinking, many sticking points, many things that we know come up and confront us when we're trying to initiate change. The example today, we really are excited about the speaker, because all of these things can slow and sometimes stop change that gets at the heart of solutions and at the heart of what needs to really shift. But we're hopeful that some of what SDCCE has done will kind of spark ideas for how you might approach some of the really deep-seated or ongoing challenging processes that you're facing. So thank you so much for your honesty. We will have a couple of questions throughout our time together today. And just, we appreciate that reflection. We appreciate your ability to share what you're going through on your campuses in your respective roles. And we all know that change is needed. We know it requires action. We hope that this outline and example can inspire you to take action. And then before I give our speaker the floor, we're so grateful that Dr. Carter had time to work with us today, but we also want to make sure we honor and thank Dr. Michelle Fishtal, who wasn't able to join us just today, but she's the Vice President of Instruction at College of Continuing Ed, and she's also been, a partner in co-planning, co-leading, in full partnership with Dr. Carter as they've approached this work. And we hope that you walk away with it with some tangible tools for applying this kind of approach at your own campus. So with that said, I would love to pass it over to Dr. Carter to dive right into this theory to praxis content.
Thank you so much, Stacy and Simone. I just want to extend my sincerest gratitude and appreciation for the both of you for creating this platform and allowing us to share our story, even though we're still in the beginning phases of it, but also for committing to help us see through the transformation that we begin. So much of what I'm going to share with you all today is thanks to the coaching work that Stacy and Simone has done. They've really helped us take a fresh approach to how we seek to see this change happen within our institution. So thank you. And I also want to thank my partner and colleague, Dr. Michelle Fishtal, who, as Simone mentioned, has also been integral in this work, right? I can't underscore enough how important it was that we approach this work collaboratively between student services and instructional services. And I think that our partnership and the way we've collaborated in this has contributed a lot to the success of this work. And so before I hop into talking about what strategic enrollment management is, I want to set the context for you all a little bit about who we are as an institution. So I'm from the College of Continuing Education. We are the adult non-credit division of the San Diego Community College District. So we serve non-traditional students in various areas, ESL, various CTE programs, and we have a large emeritus program. We have hundreds of certificate programs and over 13 different career pathways for our students. We have a large high school diploma program. Our students are traditionally adult learners. And we have over 7 campuses in San Diego and offsite centers as well. And so when you think about our campus, we're very non-traditional in that way, right? We're decentralized. The beauty of our college is that we get to serve students in the communities in which they live, right? But the challenge of that is that we become very decentralized as an institution, with everybody kind of doing their own thing, not a lot of things bringing us together in a way that would allow us to function as one institution. And that was really a part of the call to action for us as we, in 2021, begin our transition back to campus and recognize what the pandemic did to not just our student population and the number of students that we served, but to our surrounding communities and to our internal college community, like who we had become as an institution and with each other had transformed through the pandemic, right? We were very much in survival mode and in crisis mode, banding together to be able to support the students that we still had. And as, we begin the transition back to campus, we recognized that we would need to approach our work in a new way in order to bring our students back. So just to give you some context, we had prior to the pandemic, we have been serving over 30,000 students. Right now, we're at about 10,000 students or less, right? So I know that the pandemic has been detrimental for enrollment for colleges across the state, but we took a heavy hit within the College of Continuing Education. Some of our programs thrived, but many of the programs and the students that we serve were not able to maintain online. And not only not able to maintain online, the pandemic brought a new reality to their lives, right? Of different things that they had to focus on different than school. And so we found ourselves to be in a crucible moment, right? I want to read a definition of what a crucible moment is. By definition, a crucible moment is a transformative experience through which an individual comes to a new and altered sense of identity, right? We were figuring out, again, who we were as an institution and who we wanted to become for our community. And so we begin this idea, this conversation of wanting to develop this strategic enrollment management plan. And we started to talk about what that means for us, right? That we wanted to get our students back, how we were going to get our students back, how do we want to close equity gaps and reduce the amount of students that are leaving the institution. And as we made space for some of this reflection, we really held up a mirror to ourselves, and we realized that this was something deeper than what we even began talking about initially. We couldn't place enrollment management strategies on top of something that really was not fully functioning. And when we started to look at our culture in relation to equity, we recognized that we needed to identify the core values that would lead kind of this transformation that we were seeking. And so one of those resources that really resonated with us was the National Equity Project, Liberatory Design, and it fit in with the transformational change NEP liberatory design mindsets. We love these, and we talked a lot with Stacy and Simone about integrating underlying principles of these mindsets into equity-minded redesign. So we began sharing Stacy's going to share the resources in the chat. So for us, a key part of our redesign efforts meant that we first needed to attend to the healing, and that was particularly resonant within our institution. And I saw that in the chat, right? When folks responded to the question, what are your pain points, right? For many of us, it is the culture, right? And it's the trauma that has occurred within our institutions over time that we tend not to take a moment and look back and really address and face, but that we tend to just kind of move forward. For us, we knew that there would be no moving forward and there would be no transformation for our institution and thus for our students if we weren't willing to attend to the healing. So this idea of attending to healing and the liberatory design mindset that shows us how do we do that in an effective way without a top-down approach really resonated for us. And so Dr. Fisher and I, in working with Stacy and Simone, started to take on some of those. I'm sorry, my president is tapping on my window and sharing some good news. And so we started to take on some of those liberatory design mindsets and started to apply them. And I want to say to you, right, that we are still very much in the process of learning what this means for us, right? One of the first things that we did is we started to identify the values that we wanted to place in this work. We wanted healing to be a core value because we know that a lot of people have been hurt by our institution, and we wanted to rectify that, both for our students and for our faculty and our staff, right? We knew that there was a lack of trust within our institution because of this hurt that we needed to attend to, right? So Michelle, Dr. Fisher and I, I think we both shared the same kind of thought of wanting to come to this in a very authentic way. We didn't want to come top down. We wanted to listen. We wanted to bring our listening ears and our heart and love to this institution, right? And we knew that it was different than how perhaps change had been approached in the past. And, to be quite honest, I think that there's some folks in our institution that if you ask them, they're still, kind of waiting for the ball to drop of like, is this real? Are we going to be able to see this change through and the intention in which you said it, right? And so we always share this at our institution is that we only move at the speed of trust, right? And so we recognize that, and we kind of utilize that mindset in our framework of how we approach this work is that, as Dr. Fisher and I are setting this intention forward of what type of transformation we seek to achieve within our institution, we recognize that it's incumbent upon us as leaders to see some of this change through, right? So that the folks within our institution that has been waiting for this change to happen for so long can see some of these wins, and that helps build the trust that essentially changes and shifts the culture, right? But it's a time game. So I don't want to say that we are all the way there yet, but that's certainly the intention in which we have come into this space.
Thank you so much for kind of that level setting and that intention sharing. I remember, talking a little bit, and I'll put that quote in the chat here about you were just telling us like culture eats strategy for breakfast. And we have to address the culture before moving forward. We felt like this title today, talking about taking things from theory to praxis, it would be good to ground it with a quote from Pedagogy of the Oppressed. When we're talking about liberation as a praxis, it's about the action and reflection of men and women upon their world in order to transform it. And so we're talking about transformational change. We love that SDCCE has taken a lot of the National Equity Project theoretical mindsets and started placing them into action in thoughtful and strategic ways to ignite community-fueled transformational change that, like you said, Dr. Carter, is not top down, but really does come from the community that benefits from it, the community that has to work and live in it, the culture that sustains it. So I want to give it back to you so that you can outline how you went about this approach.
Absolutely. So our transformational action and reflection is organized in a series of cross-functional task forces. So folks on our campus that have been equipped with the resources, community insights, and leadership support to reimagine what our college can be, right? This idea of radical dreaming was something that has been very impactful for us, to give folks the permission and the space to dream and think differently, right? But that also goes hand in hand with trust, right? We're going to talk a little bit about the timeline of how we approach this work later, right? But in every space that we've come into, we've introduced this idea of kind of radical dreaming and and liberatory dreaming, what that looks like and what it means. And folks are still working through that ability to be able to dream at that level as we continue to build trust. So we call this reaching our shared vision of an educationally liberated SDCCE. So the task forces are organized into 5 primary focus areas. Each task force was designed to address a specific part of the student journey, right? So as we begin to meet with our constituent groups, the same things came up over and over again. We need to transform our website. We don't have a comprehensive marketing plan. Our students don't know how to onboard, or we have too many different onboarding processes. How do we do student-centered scheduling that represents, the needs of our community? How do students transition to and through our institution? And what does it look like to build new programs and bring innovation into our institution? So while each task force has a designated scope of work, we recognize that much of this work is interconnected. Because of the symbiotic nature of the task forces, we've ensured broad representation of classified professionals, students, faculty, and administrators that represent various program and administrative areas. The intentional representation of folks throughout the campus adds layers of collegiality and shared governance while building capacity and momentum for transformational equity-driven redesign for our campus. So this redesign is not about what we do so much as it is about how we're doing it and who we're doing it for. And I just want to take a moment to say that one of the things that we've noticed as we've approached this work is, like you just mentioned it, Stacey or Simone, that culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So in every moment where we're thinking, we're addressing the culture, we're kind of recognizing that it's still a strategy, right? So even these task forces, even though we're approaching it in a way that we're trying to shift the culture, the task forces in itself is also a strategy, and the culture will demolish it if we don't do it intentionally and mindfully, right? And so I mentioned all of the various constituent groups that are a part of these, but we're constantly having to ask ourselves, who is still not at the table, right? Who still doesn't know about this work, right? Because it tends to be the same people that get engaged with the work over and over again, that have been engaged. And even when we call new people in, right, it's still not broad enough. So we're always looking at communication strategies and engagement strategies to bring people in this work so that it's a true shared vision and shared work for the entire institution and not just for a few passionate individuals. And so that has been our work with transforming our culture, right? Is constantly acknowledging that, not getting comfortable in the status quo, right? And really digging into those questions about who we need to call into this work.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. And I think that brings us really to this piece. We're kind of seeing these themes around this mindset of liberatory collaboration and what does it actually mean? It's not enough to just bring groups together, but you really have to foster that liberatory collaboration that you want to see. And it needs to not be top down in the approach. It's really about engaging the community authentically, purposefully, and also thinking about when you do design, it's not you're designing for students or you're designing for your community. It should be you're designing with, really incorporating and bringing in the communities, the students you're trying to serve as co-collaborators in that process is what will make it liberatory and truly transformational. So think about that who as we continue on in our session today.
Yeah, and so we started to build out this ecosystem of engagement, right? And I just want to acknowledge that for some of this, we were building the plane as we were flying it. Like we didn't come with like this whole ecosystem and model all put together. We just kind of came with this organic ground roots approach of we knew how we wanted to do the work and we knew the feelings that we wanted our folks to have at the end of it. And we built it and we listened and we learned a little bit more and then we adjusted and we made those adjustments. One of the things that was really important for us as we began to develop this work, I talked about love and trust, right? And building that trust. we knew that in order for folks to be engaged in this work, we needed to have some quick wins, right? And so, but at the same time, when you call more people in, it slows the process down. And so we try to be strategic in identifying our low-hanging fruit. What are the things that we can change right away? What are the things that we hear from folks in terms of the type of change that they want to see to feel more engaged in their work that we can change right away while we're building the conversations, bringing people in and continuing to build the trust. And so for our ecosystem of engagement, we have kind of our broader ring, or our internal ring of folks, our students, our faculty, our administration, and our classified professionals that make up the task force and are engaged in various, constituent groups throughout the campus. But then we begin to think about how we might engage folks from our district office, our sister colleges, and our board of trustees, right? That work is also critical to our success, right? We are non-credit, so we thought of ourselves as the beginning of the guided pathway. In fact, the way that Stacy and Simone got engaged in this work with us is that, they had a meeting, they asked us to meet with them about, just some updates where you are with guided pathways. Non-credit institutions, as a non-credit institution, we didn't receive guided pathways money, right? And so we were just telling them, well, we don't have guided pathways money, but this is the work that we're trying to do within our institution. And they're like, well, that is essentially, kind of the spirit and the heart of guided pathways. So, kind of let's get to it. And so we engaging our sister colleges around what alignment looked like from non-credit to credit and how they can be a part of shaping this vision with us, right? And their investment in this work was more pertinent than ever because of where we are, kind of in the mid of post-COVID, or wherever we are with COVID, right? Is that all of our enrollment is suffering, right? So how do we tap into our adult learners within our non-credit to expand the pathways and opportunities for students at the credit side? Our district office was critical in this because you think about some of the challenges that we've had in terms of our systems required support from IT and educational services, and they've been critical in helping to build this work as well. And of course, the Board of Trustees and their support and resources to get this done. And so we also begin to think about how do we then engage our community members, our partner organizations to help kind of round out our ecosystem and bring them into some of this work and allow them to tell us how we build back in a way that really reflects our commitment to our community. And so we're in the process of having those conversations, what that looks like, and how to continue to build that engagement. So we have a question for you. So in your transformational redesign spaces, how often are key groups purposefully represented and included in the work that you're doing at your campus?
And this is another opportunity to jump into the Mentimeter. We will go ahead and hide the results again for a moment. But thinking of your context, trying to do this redesign work, who typically gets included and who might not. We're going to give folks a minute or so to think about that, reflect on it, and we will reveal the results in a moment. Good point, Leticia in chat. In California, we have a unique context of our counseling faculty, our instructional classroom faculty, and also our librarian faculty. And sometimes they are engaged differently. So just try to think maybe collectively of what those groups might represent on your particular campus, but we'll keep that in mind for similar questions going forward. Leticia, thank you. So we'll continue to we'll leave that open for folks to finish voting here. But yeah, some interesting themes coming out. Very high in the administrator involvement, faculty being involved at like the next highest level. But then we're seeing definitely almost very similar levels of 2 is rarely engaged on that Likert scale. And it kind of seems very similar that these groups tend to get left out of collaborative planning processes and redesign work. So thank you for doing that engagement activity, and we'll jump back into our presentation here. So Dr. Carter can tell a little bit more about the process.
Yes. So we wanted to give you kind of like a timeline of how this work has unfolded over the course of the last year. So we started out in this like last summer, fall, and at the same time, I was new to the institution, by the way, I should let you all know. I started my role as interim vice president in July of 2021, and then took on the permanent role in December of 2021, right? So I was really, I don't know if it was naivete or what it was, or, but really kind of going off on the deep end here. But I think it was just a kind of perfect moment in time that allowed for us to engage in this work deeply together quickly after me arriving at the institution. So we started in summer with listening sessions. We wanted to really listen to what our community had to say about our college, seeking advice through coaching strategy sessions that will continue throughout the process. Once we had a cross-functional group in major areas of our campus through the task force, we had shared our vision with them. We had a whole-scale orientation and kickoff to this effort, implementing many of the national equity project approaches to meeting, which was also transformational for us, right? Because we were used to kind of stale meetings. And I remember meeting with Stacey and Simone, and we were kind of sharing presentations, a slide deck of what we were going to present to folks. And they were like, let us reimagine this for you. And even that, re-envisioning that slide deck and putting some color in it was inspirational for folks, right? It breathed some air into our institution, into our meeting spaces that shifted the energy in the room. So we followed that up with trainings for the leads of these groups that would help them to facilitate and lead people in their respective task force redesign areas. So the coaching for the leads was vital and ongoing with support from Stacey and Simone. We knew that we had to invest in our task force leads so that they could feel comfortable leading cross-functional groups through multifaceted and complex changes. So before I move forward with the timeline, I just want to make a point about this, right? This is where culture rears its ugly head, right? And we continue to experience this. Me, myself, I'm leading one of the task forces, and we continue, especially in our in our task forces, experience our culture, the people, the patterns, the personalities, right? And this is where giving your task force leads and your folks who lead these conversations and spaces tools and resources, training and professional development to understand how to address culture in its tracks when it's rearing its ugly head, and to shift the energy in the room is so critical. And it's something that we are continuously learning. It's like a practice, right? How you show up in a space, right? How you elevate the energy in a space, how you shift when you recognize a pattern, of an institution going backwards, how you shift and elevate to move the energy forward is something that we're continuously learning how to do. So once our groups understood the goals, it was time to reach for our broader community input. So we took the task force initiative and we started to develop them out. This equity-minded redesign we took it to our institution day, which is like our spring convocation, and we led activities that we'll dive into in just a moment. It was a chance for our college to contribute as a whole and engage in co-creating this work with us. And the institution day content became the jump off point for our task force meetings, right? So that was another part of our ecosystem of engagement. We gave the entire institution an opportunity to connect in this work. And then we helped build trust by taking that information and putting it into action and not just kind of sitting on it. So this approach to redesign also inspired an ongoing counseling redesign project to begin the spirit of innovation and community-centered creation. And it definitely brought some momentum and openness to reimagining many different spaces and departments within student services. We continued to reaching out to the larger community and strategically engaging key groups with things like our art committee meetings, which is our access, retention, and completion committee, and our STAR classified conference, which is where our classified professionals do their professional development. That was critical, right? Taking this to the classified professionals and allowing them to be centered in this work really helped us to elevate the work. So each of these spaces made sure it wasn't just presenting, but us co-creating these groups. We also introduced some new language and definitions, like what does it mean to be a co-creator? How folks can get engaged in this work was critical. We presented the progress on this at our SDCCE board meeting and our campus board meeting where our board of trustees were, making sure that our sister colleges and district offices and our board could see and understand the vision for this change, and creating an invitation for them to co-create this work with us, which actually led to fruitful engagement with our sister colleges. And we've continued this work that innovate with the innovative approach, inspiring redesign work for our student services retreat. We recently had a student services retreat with over 100 student services staff at one of our campus, the first of its kind for this institution, right? Again, we got to remember we're in 7 different locations throughout San Diego, so we're not like your traditional college where you see each other every day, right? So bringing folks together to develop a shared vision for student services was another way that we helped people feel centered as co-creators in this work, and also helped to build trust. We recently took a communication-specific work group to the Pathways to Equity conference to plan how to increase transparency and share outs about this redesign work in a way that honors and celebrates the progress that is truly grassroots. And that team was made up primarily of classified professionals. So we're currently at the stage of prioritizing and recommending solutions that have risen out of our community suggestions that have been refined in our work groups and will be implemented and prototyped at our college. And in order to support the success of these solutions, we'll be taking the time to have a managers and supervisors retreat, offering folks a space and opportunity to discover how they can help make the change impactful. So over the course of the spring semester, each of the task force have met to develop these recommendations for their specific area. And so we're prioritizing, but what we recognize, Dr. Fishdahl and myself, is that before we can move forward, right, we need to step back a little bit and attend to the healing, right? So the process of change is not linear, right? It's cyclical. It's up and down. It's a roller coaster, right? We've made some progress. We've built some trust. We've asked our deans to engage in this work and lead this work, and they put their heart and soul in it. But we still recognize, like, okay, we need to take this summer to really attend to the hearts and to the healing of our middle management, and particularly in order to really dive a little bit deeper and to create some more cultural systemic change in order to see some of the strategy that we've created through the recommendations implemented in a way in which we intended them.
Thank you. And I think just to spotlight here, going back to that ecosystem of engagement, this process overall, and you'll see here in the key, very holistically trying to touch base with different constituency groups across the process and make sure it is really, truly transformational. That brings us into a little bit about the process and tools and resources that San Diego College of Continuing Education utilized throughout their approach. We'll try to have to breeze through this section because I know we're already coming up on time. But one of the big pieces we were thinking is not only about really thinking with purpose, right? What can we do to make sure we have our outcomes clearly defined for what we are trying to achieve? Thinking about, for that orientation, for example, what types of outcomes around the process or understanding that folks need, but then what are also those effective process experiential outcomes? How should people be feeling? Because again, this is around changing culture just as much as it is around moving the student redesign work forward. And so there are questions, for example, that you might be able to ask that do both of these things, that get people involved in the process, involved in that shared understanding and meaning making. We also want to highlight working to transform power as another liberatory design mindset, really helping to focus, right, and acknowledge the systemic barriers, the marginalization of certain community members, all of these parts and pieces, which are important to recognize as you are working with culture. And so we'll talk about some strategies to transform power, including clarity and of process and deliverables, making sure folks are all on the same page, developing those leaders and skills, as Dr. Carter mentioned, having a task force training to get people on the same page. We also want to stress connection before content, why it is important really to bring in the culture building, community building as a part of this, and then enabling safe and authentic collaboration. For folks that have been in our office hours series this semester, starting with redesign principles and shared understanding is completely important. There will be a tool and resource that you can check out more there, but that is SDCCE's redesign model. And then we also very quickly, briefly touch base around the backwards design process. Dr. Carter was talking about freedom dreaming, having that opportunity to imagine a different world and a different future in a different institution, organization, how folks show up, and then using that and then drawing that into redesign solutions and eventually action is really important so people can be on the same page and rowing the boat in the same direction. One of the things and tools we'll give you as part of the resource packet is from that backwards design, how can you actually have a deliverable around it? We've created and SDCCE has used a redesign worksheet so that folks were clear on kind of what the end result was going to look like in these task force groups. And that helped to relieve a lot of anxiety that folks were facing. And then similarly, helping to empower people with those leadership skills, those middle level leaders, different leaders of those task force groups who may not have led transformational liberatory oriented types of meetings before, right? What can we do? One of the things, provide a template. You'll see the connection before context, right? Or before content built in as part of these agenda templates, making sure that you're bringing people together, that you're playing music at the beginning of meetings to bring people into a space. And we'll go over some more of these specific categories here. So for example, incorporating art, you heard some music today, poetry, things that really bring out those affective components. We also really encourage shared community agreements, which we'll go into in a bit here. And then thoughtful modalities of engagement, recognizing that people can show up in different ways and honoring that, whether that's, we'll go into a little bit of that, but Zoom engagement, how are you showing up, acknowledging people's humanness in those spaces, and then again, building that community. Pass it over to Simone here.
Yes, these examples we're all going to share with you. I do want to shout out English professor Jen Derillo at Mesa College, who shared these community agreements with us. Is something we use to guide this space as these task forces began meeting. Dr. Carter mentioned it earlier, moving at the speed of trust. This is how we're going to engage together. We also gave kind of clear guidelines that if you can be on video, we would love that. But if you can't, we still want you engaged. You can use reaction buttons. You can use the chat. If you've got a question, let us know, and making folks making sure they don't have to question how you want engagement. If you want to make this grassroots, inclusive, communicative, making that clear from the outset. We also tried to acknowledge humanity in building this. So throughout the day, throughout these meetings, across that whole timeline, there are moments to be human. Bio breaks, breathing breaks, stretching breaks. We're all folks working together. We should acknowledge the human bodies we need to take care of while we're doing the work. Build that into the meeting and kind of see how that energy shifts. We also built in introductions that could be a little bit fun. My favorite is like not just saying who you are and what your pronouns are, which is wonderful, but also if we're at different campuses, like College of Continuing Ed, where are you at? Where's your home campus? And what's something that maybe brings you joy in terms of music, something that's a pick-me-up song. And then maybe we're in a conversation about the music we like. Maybe there's a playlist created for the times when we're doing Mentimeters and contributing anonymously. So I can feel my favorite jam and start thinking about the college that I want to work at or the vision I have for the task force group that I'm a part of. We didn't just engage in the chat, we used other forms like Jamboard. So we might ask folks as they're entering the space, Dr. Carter was extremely honest and transparent about how the pandemic impacted communities served, not just students, but also employees, folks serving these students, folks rooting for these students, and also going through their own challenges. So how are we leaning away from toxic positivity that just puts a smile on and actually making space for what we know people are juggling, what's weighing on their mind? And then also providing breakout spaces. So if I've never talked to my colleague that maybe works at another campus for more than 2 minutes, we get a little chance to maybe talk about something that's inspirational, something that hits our heart, something that feels good about our educational journey. And that's throughout that timeline. We also, if we didn't have a ton of time, might use things like word clouds. So that question of that came into institution day, classified faculty, all of these folks get to answer, what would the educationally liberated SDCCE of the future feel like? Let's bring some of our heart space and our ideas for this campus and this college to life, and let's look at it. I want to pass it back over to Dr. Carter to walk you through an institution day activity with this kind of final example of what change in action looks like with this process.
Yes. So this last piece might be the most important because we recognize that innovative ideas can come from anywhere. So it's so important to make sure folks feel like they're able to contribute their ideas and that their ideas are welcome. So we included community input as a large part of our institution day activity, allowing folks to choose their own adventure by joining whichever task force breakout session that resonated with them, and then answering insightful and thoughtful questions about what the redesign might look like. And we had answers pouring into each of these boards, and you can see some examples of them here. The task force groups then took those boards and reviewed them because we had then students that were included as a part of our task force groups. We had one student, so you can see here some of the examples that came in. And so this led to the development of an idea that was actually created by a student in Task Force 1 around how they wanted to see this work show up and appear on our website to make sure that students felt like they belonged. And we're in the process right now of prototyping this and improving this. This is an example of our student-centered onboarding that was created through Task Force 1 that would allow students to apply and register and steps. That is huge for us. It looks simple on this slide, but trust me, it took a lot of work for us to get to this space. And we're in the process of developing an implementation plan for this new onboarding process. So this is just one example of how fostering liberatory collaboration and transformation can really transform your institution and the benefits of a campus making this equity-minded redesign effort a priority.
Yeah, and then maybe a final thought here, Dr. Carter, what does it mean to lead in this type of environment? How do you practice that self-awareness as part of your work?
I can't lie and say that it's been easy. It's been constantly calling myself to the table as a leader as well, having my true north clear, like what are my values and how do I want to show up in this role and serve this institution and the people of this institution. And self-awareness has been key, right? Like always looking in the mirror and saying, am I walking in alignment with who I seek to be, as a person and as a leader? But also I think being transparent and allowing myself to be seen, letting people know that I'm not perfect, that I don't know everything, and that's not the goal, right? And I think that transparency and vulnerability has been an important piece of helping to build trust within the institution. And the one thing I can share is that, for me, is still recognizing that I'm a work in progress, we're a work in progress, right? But when I can be transparent and vulnerable and clear about that, then it allows other people to do the same. And we come to the work, with the level of vulnerability and love that will allow us to develop something that's beautiful. And I think we're in the space of doing that. And I don't want to make it seem like we got it all figured out or it's easy. We're certainly still learning this, and we're certain, but I can't wait to see where we are as an institution 5 years from now, 10 years from now, right? I recognize that the fruits of this labor will, come to fruition. and we'll be able to see a new college because of it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carter. And there was just so much good work to share. If folks have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat for Dr. Carter, and we will follow up and send those out as part of our resource document as well. Or if you want to stick around maybe for a few moments after we wrap up our session today, we did want to spotlight, of course, some of the resources, including we're wrapping up for this academic year, but we plan and look forward to seeing y'all once again in the new academic year. And we would like to co-create and co-collaborate on making that space together with you. So in the chat, Simone has dropped a topic suggestion link that you can contribute some ideas, things that you might be thinking about. So there is that for y'all. We also want to highlight and acknowledge where we are going to be dropping this resource is in our living document, our San Diego Imperial Guide Pathways Resource Guide. If you bookmark that link, that's going to get regularly updated with new resources, but we'll also send out an email letting you know when it gets updated with this recording and all of the resources that we have talked about today. In case you're not also already connected with us and would like to get resources or other things outside of the resource guide, please join our listserv. We send out helpful information about guide pathways happenings, professional development, and all of that good stuff as well. And then one final announcement for those in California Community College System, we will be having an upcoming webinar happening in June. With that, please don't be strangers, connect with us. We are here to help support you and hope you can do similar work, the real deep culture work that folks at SDCCE, including Dr. Carter, Dr. Fishdahl, and their teams have been doing. We are around and available to help and support you in doing that work and being co-collaborators together. And I will give it over to Simone to final thoughts, wrap up for the day.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. I know you're running to another meeting, so thank you for the time. Feel free to contribute questions if you have them. We will get them to her.
Thank you, everyone. So great to see you all.